Portman, how that meeting went with the president. I understand the president got a standing ovation when he entered the room.
He did. He got a standing ovation, but he always does when he enters that room because it's the Republican Senate, and he did a good job. He talked about health care, by the way. I just heard your report and said that Republicans ought to be for protecting people with pre-existing conditions. I couldn't agree with him more. I think that's the consensus among Republicans. The question is not about pre-existing conditions. We agree on that. The question is about the incredibly high costs that have been associated with the Affordable Care Act, and how do we provide better access to people and lower costs?
All right, but if the president and your colleagues, sir, are interested in, through the Justice Department right now, following up on a Texas law to just get rid of the Affordable Care Act, you don't have anything yet in its place, so you could be, behind a rock and a hard place, right?
Yeah, it'll take a while, as you know, and I don't know that this will make its way up to the Supreme Court even before the end of this first term for the president, the end of this Congress. But it doesn't mean we shouldn't get started. We should, and we should have a backup plan. We should be sure that we're protecting pre-existing conditions. We should also be sure that we're giving people a better deal for their health care dollars. I mean,
don't you think you should have a backup plan, though, Senator, before you jettison the one that's out there? Because you're going to have millions of people potentially who are going to be very scared, if not in the most extreme case, out of coverage.
No, of course, but it wouldn't be Congress that gets rid of it. It would be the Supreme Court saying that it's unconstitutional.
Yeah, but those people would still be left out, right? So what do you do? I mean, they're going to turn around and blame you guys, whether that's fair or not. What do you do?
So we should act. We should act. I mean, I have always believed that the constitutional underpinnings of the Affordable Care Act were really questionable. We've talked about this before. It's been a couple of years probably, but it never made sense, to say that this was somehow a constitutional bill when, in fact, the mandate was viewed to be a taxing power issue by the Supreme Court, which was quite a stretch to be able to call it constitutional. Then that was taken out in the tax bill. As you know, that is something that has now led this court in Texas to say, well, now there's really not a constitutional leg to stand on. But the question is, what should we do legislatively? So regardless what the court does, if the court decides it's unconstitutional or if it upholds the ACA, we should still move, because legislation is needed to be able to reduce costs in health care, improve access, ensure people have pre-existing condition coverage. We're getting started on that right now with prescription drug costs.
You're confident something will get done to avoid that, because that was obviously a big issue in the midterms. But Senator, I'd like to switch gears here on the Mueller report and what you think the messages were. Your colleague Lindsey Graham says it's time to investigate how the investigation started. Are you in the camp that says, all right, as all these other investigations are going on in the House, for example, looking at the president's finances and starting your own, Republicans starting their own, to get to the bottom of how the investigation of the president started? Sounds like a lot of investigations.
Yeah, I think some people are getting investigation fatigue, and I don't blame them. But let me just say two things about it.
That Senator Graham, maybe with the best of intentions, risks doing the same?
Well, no, look, I think we've got to be darn sure that we haven't politicized our justice system, and particularly the FBI, and particularly the FISA courts. And so I do think it's a worthwhile investigation to have. I don't support having another independent or special counsel to do that. I think that's the difference. I think the Justice Department should have, and I hope they are investigating that anyway, Neil, because some of the charges that have been talked about and some of the information that you provided today, for instance, about some meetings that might have taken place and so on. Of course, the Justice Department should look at that, but it doesn't require having another independent counsel and another, big investigation. It should be something that they do on their own. But in terms of this Mueller report, as you know, I said from the start, let's let Mueller do his work. Let's have him do it expeditiously. It did take almost 2 years. And let's have him follow the facts wherever they lead. And that's what happened. And guess what? There was no collusion. And because of the recommendation from the report, the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein, who actually began this investigation, both say that there is no obstruction. So I think this is good for the country. This is what everybody in the country should be happy about, because it shows that there was not this collusion and there was not the obstruction of justice that was talked about. That's good for the country. It doesn't mean that the Russians didn't interfere. They did, and that's also in the report. I can't wait to see it, and I'm for
obviously, your Democratic colleagues want that same report out sooner rather than later. They also want to know whether, Bob Mueller did give the president a complete pass on obstruction of justice. We're led to believe from Attorney General Barr that there was nothing there either damning or undamning. But I'm wondering what you make of the back and forth over this obstruction issue and whether any delay will just compound that Democratic attack mode.
Yeah, well, look, I don't think there should be much of a delay. I'm told it'll be a matter of days or weeks before we get the report. That's good. Obviously, there'll have to be some grand jury and classified information that's redacted. But I want to see the report. The American people deserve to see it. That's what's most important. And I think what we'll find is, based on the summary, that there is no evidence with regard to the obstruction issue in terms of an actual indictment or a charge. Right. And again, it wasn't just the Attorney General, it was also the Deputy Attorney General who looked at all the information in the report and concluded that there was no basis for an obstruction of justice charge to be leveled. So I think that's good news for the country. Again, I hope that we can kind of move on and deal with other pressing issues we've got, like health care and ensuring we protect people with pre-existing conditions.
Senator, thank you. It's always good catching up with you. Rob Portman, the beautiful state of Ohio. By now.